Growing up, the old Victorian house on street was more than just a building to me. It was my entire universe. My father had inherited this grand residence from his parents, and my mother took immense pride in it. "Just look at these original hardwood floors," she would exclaim, showcasing the house to her friends at countless garden parties, her wine glass making a grand gesture in her hand. Craftsmanship like this is rare these days. I was 8 when we moved into that majestic house. As my mother relished in the role of the hostess, flaunting her prized home, I found solace and companionship in my father. He seemed to understand me in a way that my mother didn't. Whenever I finished a book, he'd magically produce a new one. "Samantha," he'd begin with a sparkle in his eyes, presenting another novel with a flourish. "I think you're going to love this one." And I always did. Meanwhile, my mother couldn't understand my penchant for solitude. "Samantha, sweetie," she'd often sigh, watching me curled up in the window seat with my latest read. "Wouldn't you rather play outside with the other kids? Sarah from next door just got a new bike." But I was content where I was, my eyes never leaving the page, even as I sensed her disappointment hovering in the background. My father would subtly support me with a reassuring wink from behind his newspaper. Though I was often immersed in my own world, I wasn't entirely withdrawn. At school, I had my moments of recognition, particularly when I started writing for the school newspaper. My stories sparked conversations, and even the popular kids would eagerly inquire about when my next article would appear. Yet, my most cherished retreat remained my grandmother's house, which housed an enchanting library filled with the aroma of old paper and leather. "A writer needs to read," my grandmother would say, her fingers tracing the spines of her cherished collection. She would let me spend countless hours there, bringing me cookies and hot chocolate as I explored everything from classic novels to modern mysteries. Everything changed when I was 13. I remember vividly the day the police arrived at our doorstep. The image of my mother's coffee cup shattering on the kitchen floor, the solemn expression on the officer's face, and his words, "Terrible accident," reverberating through our home, remain etched in my memory. Suddenly, my father was gone. In the weeks that followed, my mother's grief was palpable. At night, I could hear her trying to stifle her sobs into her pillow. But gradually, her tears gave way to makeup and perfume bottles, and she began to venture out in the evenings, returning home with a newfound vibrancy and color in her cheeks. "Life goes on, Samantha," she told me one morning over breakfast, applying lipstick while peering into her compact mirror. "We can't stay sad forever." I nodded in agreement, yet something in the way she said it seemed as though she was trying to convince herself more than me. I didn't fully understand it then. That morning was a turning point, signaling the end of my childhood. Mom met Jack at an office party, and within a week, he was dining with us. In 3 weeks, he moved his belongings into our home, and by the end of the month, they were married in a swift courthouse ceremony. Everything happened so quickly that I scarcely had time to comprehend that this stranger was now occupying my father's space, his house, his bed, and his chair at our dinner table. The first time Grandma met Jack, her worry was palpable. She pulled Mom aside into the kitchen for a quiet conversation that soon escalated into a heated argument. "Margot, you barely know this man," Grandma whispered urgently. "Think about Samantha." "I am thinking about Samantha," Mom retorted sharply. "She needs a father figure." She had a father. Grandma's voice broke, filled with emotion. "And his memory deserves more respect than this." That was the last time Grandma was allowed in our house. Mom forbade her from returning until she could be supportive. Jack wasn't physically abusive or overtly cruel, but he had subtle ways of making me feel like an outsider in my own home. He would blare the TV to full volume when I was reading, complain about the clutter when I did homework at the kitchen table, and one painful evening, he boxed up my dad's old photos right in front of me. Mom just watched and said nothing. As if that weren't enough, she began sending me to my room whenever Jack came home from work. "Honey, Jack's had a long day," she'd say, as if his need for peace outweighed my presence. Then Mom got pregnant, and any small bit of attention I once had vanished entirely. They transformed Dad's old office into a nursery, fussing over paint samples and baby clothes as if they were treasures. When my sister Freya was born, it was as if she was the center of the universe. One day, I approached Mom while she was feeding Freya. "Mom, none of my clothes fit anymore. I need new ones for school." She looked at me as if I'd asked for something extravagant. "Samantha, do you have any idea how expensive babies are? We just had to buy Freya a new crib." "But Mom, my jeans are all too short," I pleaded. "For God's sake, Margot," Jack chimed in dismissively from behind his newspaper. "The girl acts like we're made of money." Mom sighed deeply. "We'll go to the discount store this weekend, but this is the last time, Samantha. You're getting too expensive to maintain." Too expensive to maintain, as though I were a car with mounting repair bills. I glanced at Freya, decked out in her designer onesie, surrounded by brand new toys, and felt a sting of resentment harden inside me. One rainy afternoon as I trudged home from school, lost in thought, I heard a familiar, cherished voice call my name. There stood Grandma, under a red umbrella, with that mischievous grin I'd missed dearly. "Samantha, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into a warm hug that smelled of cinnamon and home. "Look at you, you've grown so tall." "Grandma, I've missed you so much," I replied, holding her tight. Her face clouded briefly. "I know, dear. Your mother. Well, she's made it clear I'm not welcome at the house anymore." Then her eyes twinkled. "But what she doesn't know won't hurt her. How about we get some hot chocolate and catch up at the cafe around the corner?" Over steaming mugs and chocolate croissants, Grandma laid out her plan. "Your mother can't stop me from seeing my granddaughter," she declared. "If she asks, just tell her you're out with friends. You do still have friends, don't you?" And just like that, my life split in two. At home, I became the unwanted shadow, tiptoeing around Jack's moods and Mom's indifference, while secretly clinging to the moments I could spend with Grandma, where I felt loved and seen. My afternoons were reserved for Grandma. We'd immerse ourselves in her extensive library, where we discussed literature and honed my writing skills. She assisted with my homework, and then we'd cook dinner together, a stark contrast to the distant interactions at home. Mom hardly ever questioned where I spent my afternoons. It seemed to relieve her when I returned home late. This routine continued for about a year until one evening, a revelation at dinner changed everything. "Freya needs her room," Jack declared as he sliced through a steak. "She's outgrowing the nursery." Confused, I looked up from my plate. "But all the bedrooms are occupied. Unless you're converting Dad's old office." "We've decided to give her your room," Mom interjected sharply. "You'll move to the pull-out couch in the basement." The basement? A dark, damp place cluttered with Jack's tools and outdated holiday decorations, barely heated during winter. This suggestion struck me as grossly unfair. "This isn't fair," I protested, seeking some semblance of support from Mom. "Your father isn't here, is he?" Mom snapped back. "And frankly, Samantha, you should be grateful we're letting you stay at all. Most kids your age would be happy to have any space to themselves." I was stunned, fork frozen midair. Her words stung, implying I was merely a charity case, not a daughter who had lived in this home since I was 8, not the girl whose father had painted clouds on her bedroom ceiling because she wanted to sleep under the sky. "When do you want me to move?" I asked, my voice empty. "This weekend," Jack responded. "I want to start painting on Monday." "Freya wants pink walls." That night, I lay in my soon-to-be-gone bed, gazing at the fading clouds above me. I took a picture with my phone, a memento of what would soon be covered in Freya's choice of pink, another piece of Dad, another part of me, erased. Living in the basement, however, turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The solitude helped me see my situation with new clarity and fueled my determination to forge a path forward. College became my escape route, my ticket to freedom. I spent every afternoon at Grandma's, diligently working on my college applications. My portfolio was robust. Editor of the school newspaper, 3 statewide creative writing competition wins, and a collection of short stories published in various youth literary magazines. My English teachers, especially Mrs. Peterson, provided glowing recommendations, describing me as the most promising young writer they'd encountered in decades. Graduation day arrived with the sticky heat of June. As I sat among my classmates in the auditorium, I scanned the crowd for familiar faces. Grandma was there, her pride evident, but the seats reserved for Mom and Jack were conspicuously empty. They had mentioned at breakfast that Freya had a dance recital that afternoon. After the ceremony, Grandma embraced me tightly. "Your father would have been so proud," she whispered, her voice laden with emotion. She handed me an envelope containing a heartfelt note and enough cash to buy a new laptop. The college acceptance letters began arriving in March. Among a few rejections and waitlists, the one I had hoped for came through. Riverside State University offered me a partial scholarship to their prestigious creative writing program. My hands shook as I read the acceptance letter repeatedly. That evening, I decided to share the news at dinner, harboring a flicker of hope that perhaps this achievement might make Mom proud and remind her of Dad's belief in my future as a writer. "I got into Riverside State," I announced, trying to steady my voice. "They're offering me a partial scholarship for their writing program." Jack didn't look up from his phone. Mom paused, her fork halfway to her mouth, then set it down slowly. "Oh, Samantha," she sighed, and my heart sank at her tone. "We need to talk about college." "What do you mean?" "I've got the scholarship and there's Dad's college fund." "About that," Mom interrupted, placing her hand protectively over her slightly swollen belly, a gesture I had come to resent. "We've had to make some adjustments to our financial planning with the new baby coming." I felt the blood drain from my face. What adjustments? Freya's private school tuition is already significant, and with another baby on the way. "My college fund," I repeated numbly. "Your father would understand," Mom said, her voice hardening. "Family comes first. Family comes first." The words echoed in my head like a cruel joke. I looked at my mother, this stranger who wore my mom's face, and realized something that had been true for years. I wasn't part of her family anymore. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. "That money isn't yours to spend," I said sharply, my voice clear and firm, surprising even myself. "Dad worked overtime for years to save that money. He wanted me to go to college." Mom's face flushed red. "How dare you be so selfish? Your sister needs. Freya is your daughter with Jack." I cut her off. "Dad's money was for me, his daughter. Have you forgotten that?" Jack slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "I've had enough of your attitude, young lady. Your mother and I have put up with your ingratitude for years. It's time she made a choice. Either you start showing some respect or what?" I challenged. Mom stood up slowly, her hand still resting on her pregnant belly. "Or you can leave." The words hung in the air like poison. "Leave," I echoed. "This is my house. Dad's house, actually." Mom's voice was ice cold. "Since your father didn't leave a will, the house legally belongs to me. You're 19 now, an adult. I'm no longer legally required to provide for you." I stared at her in disbelief. This woman, who used to pack heart-shaped sandwiches in my lunchbox and held me all night when I had a fever, was throwing me out of my own home. "You can't be serious," I said as she walked to the front door and opened it wide, letting in the spring evening air, scented with blooming lilacs, Dad's favorite.
"Get out," she said.
Frozen for a moment, I looked at this stranger in my mother's body. Then something inside me shifted, like a key turning in a lock. Without another word, I walked down to my basement room and started packing. It didn't take long. Most of my belongings were books anyway. I could hear Freya upstairs asking in her little voice what was happening. Jack's gruff response. Mom's silence. 15 minutes later, I walked out of my childhood home with 2 duffel bags and a backpack. I didn't look back. Grandma opened her door before I could even knock. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know. She pulled me into her arms, and finally, I let myself cry. When I'd calmed down enough to tell her everything, her face grew stormy, but her voice remained steady. "You'll stay here, of course," she said, wrapping me in the safety of her unwavering support. "I'm covering whatever the scholarship doesn't," Grandma insisted firmly, squeezing my hand. Your father would never forgive me if I let his daughter's dreams die because of this situation. 4 months later, I was settling into my dorm at Riverside State. I'd secured a job at the campus cafe, which fit perfectly around my class schedule. With the combination of that job, Grandma's unwavering support, and my scholarship, I could just about manage financially. Meanwhile, Mom never reached out, not a call, not a text, not a single attempt to check if I was okay. I eventually deleted her number from my phone, but erasing the ache in my chest proved much harder, especially when I saw other students with their visiting parents on weekends. By my junior year, an unexpected turn came my way. While grappling with a creative writing assignment, a new idea gripped me. It was far from my usual literary fiction. I found myself engrossed in crafting a psychological thriller about a woman unraveling dark family secrets. Perhaps I was processing more than I realized. You should enter this in the National Emerging Writers Competition, my favorite professor suggested after reading the first few chapters. It's different, raw, honest. I dedicated the next several months to perfecting the manuscript, writing in between classes and cafe shifts, often staying up until dawn. When I finally submitted it under the pseudonym E.J. Blake, I expected nothing. The competition was known for its fierce competition, attracting thousands of entries. Then, the unexpected happened. "Is this Samantha?" a crisp voice on the phone asked. "I'm calling from Riverside Publishing regarding your submission to the National Emerging Writers Competition." "Yes," I managed, my grip tightening on the phone. "We're pleased to inform you that the Glass House has won first prize. Furthermore, we'd like to offer you a publishing contract." I collapsed onto my dorm room floor in disbelief. "I'm sorry, what?" The advance they offered was beyond anything I'd ever imagined. The contract arrived the next day by courier, 12 pages of legal jargon that essentially said they believed in my work and wanted more books. 5 months later, the book hit the shelves. The reviews poured in, a stunning debut, breathtakingly honest, a new voice in contemporary fiction. By the time I graduated, I had 2 more best-selling books under my pseudonym. My second advance allowed me to buy a beautiful apartment in the city, and the third enabled me to quit my cafe job and write full-time. Grandma kept me updated on family news, though I seldom asked. "Freya started first grade," she mentioned during one of our weekly dinners, "and little Diego just started kindergarten." I nodded, pushing pasta around my plate. It felt odd knowing I had siblings who were practically strangers, yet life was flourishing without that connection, especially after meeting Messiah at a local bookstore while researching for my 4th novel. He was a literature professor who admired E.J. Blake's work, oblivious that his favorite author was right beside him. "E.J. Blake's latest book," he commented, spotting me by a display of my novels. "Brilliant stuff. Wish I knew who they really were." I smiled, keeping my secret a little longer. Maybe they just value their privacy. We married 3 years later in Grandma's backyard, surrounded by books and fairy lights. Messiah, still unaware, read a passage from The Glass House during his vows. Eventually, we bought a house in a quiet neighborhood with a library larger than my old basement room and a garden full of lilacs. Life was not just good, it was better than I could have ever imagined. Then, one unexpected day, a significant turn of events unfolded. "It's time, Arthur," my publisher stated during our quarterly meeting. "Your new book is your strongest yet, and revealing E.J. Blake's identity would create the buzz we need for its launch." Arthur was spot on, and we meticulously planned the big reveal, scheduled during a major literary event at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Journalists, critics, and fans filled the ballroom. The air was thick with anticipation. Backstage, my heart pounded as I adjusted my blazer. "Ready?" Messiah whispered with an encouraging smile. "No," I replied, half laughing through my nerves. But when has that ever stopped me? Stepping onto the stage, amid a sea of flashing cameras, I found an unexpected calm. "Hello," I began, my voice steady as I addressed the crowd. "I'm Samantha, but you might know me better as E.J. Blake." The room burst into applause and cheers. The following weeks turned into a media frenzy. My face was on magazine covers, morning shows, and literary blogs, celebrated as the mysterious E.J. Blake, literature's best-kept secret. Then, a message popped up on social media. Samantha, sweetheart, I've been watching you on TV. You look so beautiful, so successful. I've missed you so much. Can we talk? I want to make things right. Love, Mom. My finger hovered over the delete button. After 15 years of silence, she wanted to talk now. I have nothing to say to you. I typed back, firm and resolute. Please don't contact me again. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. A week later, as I worked in my home office, Messiah's voice called from downstairs. There's someone at the door. I knew who it was before I even got there. Mom stood on my porch, older and puffy-eyed. Oh, Samantha, she cried, reaching out as if nothing had happened. I stayed behind the screen door. What do you want? She wiped her eyes, quickly composing herself. I've been following your success. You've done so well for yourself. No thanks to you, I countered. I know. I made mistakes, she admitted. But I'm here because, well, Freya is graduating high school next month. She's so bright, Samantha. She got accepted to several colleges, but with Diego still in school and the economy. I laughed, harsh and bitter. You're here for money. She's your sister, Mom pressed on. My sister? I interrupted sharply. The same sister you gave my room to? The sister you spent my college fund on? That sister? Samantha, please. We're family. No. My voice was firm, resolute like steel. We're not. Family doesn't throw their child out on the street. Family doesn't steal their college fund. You made your choice 15 years ago, Mom. You chose Jack and your new family over me. You don't get to show up now acting like a loving mother just because you want my money. You ungrateful, selfish brat. Mom's voice escalated into a shriek, causing a scene now, her cries echoing down our quiet street. I stepped back inside. Goodbye, Mom. The door closed with a satisfying thud, silencing her continued protests. I hoped that was the end of it, but again I was wrong. A week later, Messiah beckoned me into the living room, his expression grave. On the TV screen, my mother was tearfully speaking to a sympathetic interviewer. My daughter abandoned us. When Samantha became famous, she faced unexpected consequences. Her newfound fame seemed to erase her memories of her humble beginnings. Meanwhile, her younger sister struggled to gather funds for college, and Samantha was unreachable, ignoring all family calls. Success had seemingly hardened her, changing her into someone unrecognizable. Her mother's public social media posts painted Samantha as a heartless daughter who had abandoned her family for fame. The backlash was swift and severe, with strangers flooding Samantha's social media with hateful messages. Things escalated until Arthur, Samantha's manager, decided it was time to clear the air. He arranged a press conference to share Samantha's perspective, despite her reluctance to publicly discuss her family issues. However, Arthur reminded her that her career was built on authenticity and truth-telling through her storytelling. It was time to share her truth. Standing before a crowd with cameras flashing, Samantha was supported by her grandmother, the only family member who had stood by her. Samantha began to unveil the real story, one that her mother had omitted. She talked about the misused college funds, her challenging home life with a cruel stepfather, and her ultimate expulsion from the family home. Her grandmother, sitting beside her with unwavering support, had documents proving her financial support for Samantha's education. Samantha shared old messages, school records, and testimonies from those who knew her during her tumultuous teenage years. She clarified that she hadn't abandoned her family. Rather, they had abandoned her. The only true family she had left was her grandmother, who had taken her in when her mother had cast her out. Following the press conference, the media coverage exploded. The narrative shifted, revealing years of family discord and abuse. Samantha's mother's attempts to malign her backfired spectacularly. The story resonated so widely that Samantha's latest book soared to the top of every bestseller list. Another attempted smear by her mother was quickly quelled by a stern letter from Samantha's lawyer, ending the public dispute. 6 years later, life for Samantha has settled into a serene pattern. She and her partner Messiah enjoy their peaceful home, surrounded by books and a thriving garden. Her grandmother visits every Sunday, and together they relish sharing real, honest stories. While Samantha sometimes wonders about her siblings, Freya and Diego, whom she never got to know, she hopes they are happy and loved. She has learned that family is not solely defined by blood, but by those who stand by you when others depart, and by the new beginnings forged from the remnants of past hardships.